Welcome to the Precision Ag Technology Educational Conference. We have 2 sessions. This afternoon is our Innovations in Industry panel. We have about 5 speakers. We're going to get a couple different topics. If you got your program, you'll see those in there. And I'll be moderating today. My name is Wes Porter. I'm Extension Precision Ag and Irrigation Specialist from University of Georgia at Tifton campus. And I'll give thanks to Glenn Raines and Luan Oliveira. Both of those are faculty at University of Georgia with me that helped coordinate this conference, both today and Saturday. And Saturday is actually, we would call it more of our academic talk. So you'll see that in the program. It's all under the Precision Ag section. You'll see what we have on Saturday too if you want to come back. So feel free to. We're going to jump in to our first presenter, and that is Nathan Dorn. And Nathan, let me pull yours up while you come up here. And he's going to discuss robots for farming. So the way I'll set this up, we'll keep an eye kind of on time for our speakers to a certain extent. As you're talking, I'll give you a 10 and 5 minute left. You see that little form out there? I'll kind of wave it at you. And if you've got not a lot of time, if you've got time at the end, we'll take some questions. But specifically, we've set this one up as we call it a panel. And so we'd like if your speakers can stick around for a little while after. We're not going to like force you to sit somewhere. But we have in the past had an open discussion at the end of everybody. And it seems like that's turned out very well in the past couple of years that, we kind of talk about topics further there and et cetera. So with that, Nathan, here's your pointer, and I'm going to move away from the program.
Right. Well, thanks. I'll do my best to follow Wesley's rules. I'm not good at rule following, for those of you that know me, but we'll see where it goes. I'm Nathan Dorn again, FarmNG. We're a small robotic platform company out of Watsonville, California. We like to call ourselves kind of the Lego kit for farmers. So you can take that frame of reference in your mind. We started out as around COVID. Silicon Valley roboticists decided to give up all that and move out to Watsonville, get away from the city. So he moved like 60 miles over the hill and started to build out his own idea of things. He built out a number of machines. He came from Google and Willow Garage. Built out a number of machines. They didn't necessarily work well. As you can see, some people didn't think that highly of it. But we kind of got into our groove when we started to do things like move shit, which, that's, I guess, what we're good for at the moment. But the cool thing about that is we got to learn a lot and start to actually work in fields and farms. So that's what it looks like today. It's the Amiga robotic platform. It's 4 wheels connected by CAN bus and power. And it's got the ability to add on other things. You can make it taller, wider, use the configuration that are applicable to your crops, your business. We've quoted everything from mining operations to education or scouting and phenotyping data collection. On top of it, it's an open source Linux-based computer that allows you to code and build your own tools on top and bring in your own software. Our first $100,000 came from a local farmer. Indoor farmer saying, hey, I can't get tractors in most of my field. I need something small. Electric would be nice because it's loud in there and most of the people are walking and working. And my crops were pretty valuable. For him, it was the difference between profit and loss. The other part about his business was that as a small farmer like that, who's been around for 50 years, about a $75 million business, he was challenged in keeping the talent he had still working. California labor rates moved up to $25 an hour to wash dishes. A lot of these older people that were saying, it's getting too hard to be on the farm to do this. I would rather do something simpler. And there were a plethora of opportunities at the same base rate. His solution was, how do I find ways to make people more valuable, have them contribute more technical and interesting work? And so we set out to work, and the first thing we did was say, how do we help you harvest? Obviously, for most of the agricultural crops for us, planting, weeding, and harvest are the biggest cost centers. So we had set out against that, and we did some initial trials to see how things worked. This is more about the journey of FarmNG. I'm not here to sell you a solution. Like, I don't have the answer for exactly your crops. I'd like you to see what we've done so far. And if you've got a problem that you don't necessarily have the solution on today, feel free to reach out to me, connect. Let's see what we can do to come closer, build an initial prototype of what you're doing, and help you make a solution. So, I mean, it came down to something pretty simple. Walking in and out of the field cost him about 30% of those people's labor hours. So in other words, if they were out there picking the whole time, they made about 30% more every hour. They also didn't have to carry stuff. With a lot of his crew getting older, he liked the idea of not having them walk in and out as much and carrying 40, 50 pounds at a time. He also liked the idea of having them more productive, because for every labor hour where they're actually picking something, they weren't necessarily costing for human resources, healthcare benefits, and supervision that was able to become a lower cost per unit. The nice part about this for this farmer, and it can be coincidental with pricing and yields and all the rest, was he did go from a net negative cash flow to a positive cash flow over the course of the 3 years as he bought it. He now has 10 of these machines. They're not all the same. You'll see as some of these later configurations, he's doing everything from flame weeding, which is a very popular thing on the internet for us, to compost spreading, harvesting, seeding, and weeding. All this kind of comes out of the same group. Our company, when we started out, was two different facets. We had FarmNG and SpaceNG. So all the technology actually is being duplicated, or has been duplicated, and the talent has been duplicated from the space business, which paid for our first few years of business. And we will go through our first launch next week on the 15th. So fingers crossed that works out with Firefly. You'll see a SpaceNG machine. What we're doing on the moon is we're navigating the lunar landing module as it comes down to the planet. You don't have GPS on the moon. I didn't realize that. So you can't like pick a spot and say, let's hit here. You actually have to navigate to the moon. And to navigate from Earth to the moon, it's 6 minutes of communication time down for the message and 6 minutes back. So our platform, or our work, is doing edge data processing and creating that map so that that lunar landing module can do that. I'm sorry, I went too far. So we went forward with that, and over the first year, we kind of grew this and created a customer network of people that were helping us solve stuff. And that also included universities. Because this Lego kit of solutions, right away we were able to put this platform in place throughout the United States. And we picked up some great customers and some great schools that were doing that. As I said in the beginning, that's an open source platform on the Linux computer on there. So that meant that researchers doing their work had a place to mount their technology, their sensors, their software, and be able to code and build to. And it meant that companies, I think there's one or two companies up here in there that have their AI models being collected on the Amiga platform. They're mounting their computers on there. They're using some of our tools to make things happen. Again, we're not the solution. We're the pieces of the solution that your company needs. And I mean, it kind of led us to a real plethora of solutions and things that we can help work on. This is a quick video showing a lot of the attachments and different tasks that are going on and the flexibility of the Amiga in different forms. We're doing everything from seeding to weeding, compost spreading. In a second, you're going to see me at home or my wife at home moving firewood, moving rocks, moving wood chips with a dump truck version of this. I mean, the idea is you've got work. We want to be a part of the solution. Sorry, I'm going to speed up through that. And other people found value in that. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation said, hey, in Africa, we've got all these countries with doing data trials and doing seed viability trials throughout different regions of Africa and microclimates, trying to find out which seed genetics perform the best. So what did they do? They deployed our platform across 5 different countries in all throughout Africa, and they're taking data sets in a uniform way on our product or on the Amiga platform, evaluating beans for which are most viable in that microclimate with those weather seasons. So that kind of comes out of that open source GPS enabled platform. That's a Linux Xavier NX computer, 2 OAK-D cameras, and GPS all mounted on board. You can purchase and add as a unit. Again, as a Lego kit, you don't have to have it all at once. As you grow as a business or your needs change, you can do it. I have 2 of them at home for my little market farm. And I mean, we change them around quarterly from being a seeder to a harvest table to a something like an over-the-road thing for the flower business. Here we're using a little bit of autonomy to show the machine operating down a road. That's teach and repeat autonomy out of the box. No subscriptions. We like to make the platform available for you to use. I hit the buttons too many times. So we also recognize that we are not going to go fast enough to fill the marketplace and compete against all the other robotics companies. So how do you protect your IP? You disperse it. You make it available to everybody so they build on top of your platform and become essential. So with the open source model, we started the Farm Robotics Challenge in collaboration with UC Ag and Natural Resources. This year, our first year, we had 11 schools, had 15 machines, and almost 150 students from around the country that competed. And to build, the rules were find a farmer, ask them what a problem is, and solve it. That was it. And we gave out $10,000 and 3 prizes for $5,000 to the winners of that team. And we really had some cool solutions. From that, 7 patents were created in that first year, and 3 companies were started. And I really like to say, like, 2 of those companies I know still exist. And they're building on top. They may or may not be building on top of the Amiga today. But what the cool part was, those farmers got the engagement of students that left their community and were going to go, they went off to college so that they can work as a roboticist at Uber, NVIDIA, Facebook, or whatever. And instead, they came back and solved a problem on a farm. And that was what we were all excited about. And you'll get to see a little bit of these different schools. We had everything from a 2-year college in Salinas, California, junior college, kids that were freshmen and sophomore working on stuff, to Carnegie Mellon, University of Nebraska, a number of good schools that were doing some pretty incredible things. We had a mix. We did have another rule that you had to have at least half of your team be undergraduates, and you can see some amazing things. I was really proud of the junior college, Hartnell. What they did better than most anybody else was actually engage with a farmer. They went to Ocean Mist. It's an artichoke grower in Castroville, California. And they built a over-the-road data collection, yield estimation machine to count artichokes that were ready to be harvested. That helped the marketing team tell what was going to happen over the next 2-3 days. That's the first of its kind, and maybe it's only one that will ever be created, artichoke yield estimator. But what was best about that was Ocean Mist built a building at Hartnell. They contributed to the university. Half of those students were kids that were children of field workers from Ocean Mist. They came back, and now you have computer science kids working back in the farms, looking at problems that their parents, their uncles, their families, their aunts have in real time. I was really proud of that. And I mean, all the other projects are amazing, but I'm more proud of the process and what we got out of it. You'll get to see a number of pieces. I have this slide deck. I'll probably be available in the show. I'll be sharing a booth with Tend today, but you'll get to see a number of schools doing that. We repeated this process last year, and we had 19 schools start the challenge, and 11 completed it, including University of Auburn, which did a really great project on forecasting planted pot sizes for a nursery. I mean, the problems don't go from one thing to the next. They're everything from corn to flower pots in nurseries. So these are some of the schools in our first year, and some of these were not just in the challenge. Some of them were ones that purchased the machine for research. Was really good for us was the machine, once it's in the school's hands, they can take it and do more with it. And they actually have a group of students that are really excited about it. In our second year, we've moved on and sold to more schools. And I'm proud to say the third year challenge, we've increased it actually started about 3 weeks ago as a challenge. And we'll have our first informational session. There's next week. There's still time to sign up. Tuskegee just signed up yesterday. I'm really excited by that. We've included, I think, over 35 schools, and that also includes at least one from Australia, Netherlands, and the UK. So this is not just one little group of people that are solving problems for agriculture. I'm Nathan Dorn again. I'd be happy to talk to any of you anytime. I don't want to take up too much of the time. I think I'm setting pretty good on time. Okay, I got a few more minutes of that. Anybody have a question or a thought while we're doing this?
Yeah, so he said, if you don't mind, there I can help.
Yeah.
Speaking to the microphone here, so we keep that recorded. Now, let me help with this.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks a lot. So you're saying you're part of the solution. So tell me, so what part of the solution are you? Are you specialized on autonomous navigation? Is this your?
We have mobility. We just call it mobility.
Just mobility.
Today.
So when it
okay,
comes-
wait, and then we have some autonomy, teach and repeat.
Yeah.
We are open source, and we are building tools for other pieces of autonomy in real time. And there are other companies that have built other solutions on top of us.
Yeah.
Because we're open source. If you wanted a certain type of autonomy, like follow me or come to me, there are other companies out there that like punch my button on my watch. There are companies out there that have done pieces of that on us, or you're able to build on top of that as well.
Okay. So, but if it comes to automatization of the farming process themselves, such as planting or harvesting, that's not what you guys are developing, correct?
So today, we've engineered and built out a number of solutions. I'll be honest, we don't know your crops, probably, maybe, but we know some of these crops, and we've built out examples of solutions. We'd like, if you have a vendor or a person or a tool already in place that does a part of it, and we fit in that, we're happy to build on top, or we're happy to have you build on it, or partner with a college like University of Georgia and ask them to pull together a team to solve your problem.
Okay.
Today, I was working on a thing for a tree nursery in Davis, California. So they're looking for a solution partner. So we're looking at bringing at least a junior college to their problems.
Question?
You said this was electronics or electric, so I assume there's a rechargeable battery. Have you tried to?
Sorry, I didn't really go deep enough into that.
Have you tried to put solar powered on here?
Yeah, it's a suitcase battery. It's pretty much an e-bike battery. You can swap it out in about 90 seconds. So you can, and the machine's only about 1.3 horsepower, this version of machine. You may see other things from us in the near future, but this is about a 1.3 horsepower battery that you can plug in, pull out, there's two of them, and recharge or have one in your truck, swap them out in real time, and then be right back in charge. We did not add solar because, as you imagine, if you add solar, you're just confining the top of the machine. I do have machines that are anywhere from 20 inches tall to 3 meters tall, 9 feet tall. I've actually got one machine that's 11 feet tall. I don't like to talk much about it because it isn't always upright. But that's what the customer wanted, and that's what they engineered to. So the solar panels would add cost, height, and also like a little bit of complexity. Our key effort is to be a solution provider at a low cost. So it can be added. There are customers that have done it. We just, we could sell it as a feature in the future if you wanted, if you had an expectation.
How long does the battery last?
And that's really tough because it's based on work, right? I tell everybody, I tested it, the two batteries that are in there, I can carry about 1,000 pounds on a flat ground for 8 hours. So, I mean, that's suitable, and if I can change them out in 90 seconds, I can pretty much get through any work day, unless I was doing something like really heavy work or in tough soil, digging deep, doing something specific. Yeah, I think I got time for one more,
Yeah,
is that right?
a couple more. You might have 3 or 4 more minutes.
Yeah?
Let's see.
All right.
We'll just start in the back and work up.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Does this have ROS support?
Yeah, it's great. So in our first challenge year, we built out ROS1 bridge. It's mostly built on Python. So we have a ROS1 bridge, and I'm excited to say in this year's challenge, one of the universities took on the role of building a open to the whole community ROS2 bridge. So you will see something, I can't validate it today. You'll see something, and I would love to have people that test on it. And we do have people that are coding and building their own stuff on top, with their own, probably make up their own bridge.
Yeah, what kind of price range I know there's probably a wide range of prices, but just a base model with a GPS to guide it and maybe a one function on it or
So
something?
I've sold them anywhere from being a manual driven machine that you just take a pennant, you follow around some powered wheelbarrow for $13,000. Same machine, but with all those other features added on and tools and other things engineered in for $55,000, $60,000. I mean, it really is. We're trying to build a solution for you. I tell you a base price is probably around 25 if you're budgeting. Build a budget price for about 25,000, and then you can we can work on what solutions you need. You know, that's what I can give you right now for information.
Any other questions for Nathan?
Yeah.
And Nathan's going to be around, so if you think of something after, you know, like I said, we have.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, we're going at about 4 o'clock. I think we're supposed to schedule. If I keep us on time as moderator, we're scheduled to be done about 3:50, and so at about 3:50 to 4, we'll have an open discussion until 5. So or longer if y'all want, but you know, the longer you drag.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Thank you very much.
All right. You want to use your computer? Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's fine. Up next, we have Daniel Goldman. He's the co-founder and president of Ground Control Robots. And Daniel's actually exhibiting. Y'all have an exhibit space too.
We do.
Through the educational portion. I think Georgia Tech, right? So
I think so.
Where your booth's at, but
I have it announced.
all right. Perfect. So.
All right, I have 20 minutes, right? All right, thank you all for having me here today. This is my first time at this meeting, and it's a little intimidating, and thanks to Glenn for inviting me here. And I want to tell you about the kind of things we've been up to in my lab. I'm a physics professor at Georgia Tech. I've been there almost 20 years, and recently the co-founder and president of a small startup called Ground Control Robotics, and I will try to tell you about our journey from basic science in the lab out hopefully into the field in the near future. Okay, Glenn asked me to sort of talk about how we got started. But first I want to say that my main job and my main goal in my research program in my lab is to try to understand animal locomotion, animal movement in complex environments. And if you look at kind of the best engineered solutions for vehicles in terrestrial environments, they all tend to have a common feature, and that's wheels or tracks. But the key principle here, and this is important, here's my one equation. Here's my one equation for the talk, is that the speed of a vehicle on flat, open ground can be predicted by how fast the wheels spin. Sounds like a trivial thing to say, but it enables all these kind of technologies, enables predictability of these technologies. Say how fast something's going to go from A to B. Okay? That's important. In my lab, we're interested in locomotors that do not have wheels, typically, and that go places that no human technology can go with the capabilities. And here's a video I'd like to show, and I figured I would show it for you all just to kind of set the stage of just kind of how impressive animal locomotion is out in the wild. There's a little lizard, and it's being attacked by a snake. Not just one snake, many snakes. And there's a lot of amazing things about this video, and I could give a whole 2 hours on it. But these animals are moving with basically equal speeds and equal capabilities over pretty nasty terrain. Some of it's sort of flowable, is what we call it, sandy stuff. Some is kind of, well, in this situation, the animal's moving through a kind of squirmy coils. It has to kind of squeeze its way through a gap. In this case, it actually does. It's going to try to climb up onto a boulder fast via all sorts of cool mechanics, flipping its tail to inertially reorient itself, using claws to engage asperities. By the way, the snakes are doing just as well with no limbs at all. In this case, the animal actually gets away, jumping. You know, we don't have engineered devices that are anywhere close to this capability, and that's what we're interested in my group, to try to understand the principles. This one made it. I think it's 1 in 4,000 or something like this that make it. You know. Okay. Another way of saying is we have very little predictability. If I were to be able to make a machine like this, we don't have the kind of Is that me buzzing? Sorry. We don't have the kind of predictability we have for wheeled and tracked vehicles in complex landscapes. And in fact, the interesting feature here, and the interesting feature that drives most of my research, is that these systems are moving, locomoting, by changing their shapes continuously. That's very different than the kind of technology we're familiar with in our world, where basically the most you can get for a shape change is a rolling wheel. Maybe flaps on an airplane. Okay. There's been a lot of progress in understanding of legged locomotion on relatively flat ground. I'm just going to give you a very brief 30 seconds of biomechanics the last 50 years. And largely that's happened by studying little animals like this lizard as they run across rigid, flat ground where the animal's foot cannot slip. What is my phone doing? I'm so sorry. Stop buzzing at me. And in fact, an important principle via comparative biological studies has been established over the last 50 years, and it's kind of amazing, is that every animal, when it's running fast enough, whether it's as small as a six-legged cockroach, as large as a kangaroo running with one leg, a four-legged dog, a two-legged human, you, all when running over flat, hard ground, tend to bounce like a kangaroo or like a pogo stick. The center of mass of the organism is lowest at mid-stance and then springs back up. And in fact, the bigger important principle here that's been established is, indeed, everything kind of, if you blur your eyes, looks like a pogo stick, and they all have the same relative springiness in their limbs. We can talk about it more technically after the break. You can read some scientific papers if you're interested. I will sprinkle some of the scientific papers throughout this, and a little bit of the technical stuff. Please ignore if you like, and then you can see me at the break if you're interested. Okay, this idea, which has been sort of worked over by biologists, my postdoctoral mentors, Bob Full and Dan Kodacek, in the last 20, 30 years, has also been instantiated or put into amazing legged robots that actually use this kind of slip, this bouncing pogo stick model. This is a famous old video, at least in our world, from Mark Rabert, who wrote a book in the 80s when he was a professor at MIT called Legged Robots That Balance. And here it is, it's the Uniroo bouncing in the halls, I think, of MIT in the leg lab, and using what we call mechanical intelligence to stay upright. There's no controller which is keeping this thing upright from cycle to cycle. It's the kind of dynamics of the spring mass system which guarantees stability. This is another big idea, which was going to echo later in the talk. Okay, well, you all probably know, maybe don't know Rabert's earliest work, but you certainly now know his more recent stuff. This is the Spot Robot. This is just a video I like to take for a few years back. You can see it just bouncing along. But this basic bouncing principle of legged locomotion on flat ground not only gives predictability on flat ground, but you can make some pretty impressive robots. And of course now, the robot's out of the bag. People are making them left and right, and people in the world of robotics are studying them nonstop and applying all sorts of learning algorithms to make them move faster, do cool things like this, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Okay. There's been a lot of progress. However, these robots are still challenged, and I know this well, in environments where animals excel. Things like really steep slopes, things like weedy brush, things like disaster sites. You'll see robots in disaster sites. And things like even inspection of small pipes. Just don't have the locomotives to get in there. The interesting thing is these aren't typically the worlds of the big locomotors that we're familiar with, like kangaroos and humans. These are the domains dominated by the small, and I'll call it elongate, the long and skinny. Things like snakes, which have no limbs but manage to traverse all sorts, as you all know well. You've been out in any field. Traverse almost like, doesn't even look like it's a problem to understand. It's so smooth. Things like centipedes, my favorite animal these days, which have lots of limbs and very little photon vision, very little vision with their eyes, lots of vision with their antennae, but basically can go anywhere in tight spaces. And even, another organism we've been studying a lot, the little tiny, almost brainless nematode worm C. elegans, which has 301 neurons, which is not a whole lot. A tiny brain, a tiny organism, can move in the most complex environments on the planet, rotten fruit, in ways better than any of our robots can do. So that's been the sort of kind of goal of my group, to sort of figure out locomotion principles for these kind of systems that we can try to understand and thus generate predictability for devices over the kind of complex terrain you see here. Now, in my group, I love animals, I grew up loving animals, we take what's called a comparative approach. We study carefully a diversity of organisms, looking for common principles that cut across systems. I want to tell you about a couple we found today. From sand-swimming lizards to centipedes to earthworms, oops, that got cut off, to little hatchling sea turtles on the coast of Jekyll Island, to fire ants, you name it, we've, and it's kind of gross and disgusting looking, we've probably either studied or wanted to study it. These animals, of course, live in complex environments. They can live in environments which might be filled with sand or flowable material. They could live in material which has gaps and footholds that are hard to come by and confined spaces. And they can also, again, live in really what we call rheologically complex material. Rock food, for example, isn't quite is a fluid, is a solid, what is it? Well, the almost random thing that doesn't seem to matter. It can traverse it with relative ease. Okay, we tend not to study the organisms in the field, although we have. We tend to bring the field to the lab. And just as a quick example, we spent many years studying, the first study, detailed biomechanical studies of how animals like this snake swim on sandy surfaces. Bringing the field to the lab requires creating models of the environment, and we use something called an air fluidized bed, which we basically brought into this world of biomechanics, which is basically airflow beneath a porous plate with a lot of sand on top of a big bed. You blow air above a critical flow rate, the material turns into a fluid, you turn it off, it forgets its fluid, it forgets any initial state, and turns back into a solid. And from there, we can now start to kind of poke animals and watch what they do. Here's an animal that is moving beautifully across the sand, like you might expect a snake to do. Here's an animal, this was a collaboration with Zoo Atlanta. We studied a lot of venomous animals and how they move. And this animal, interestingly enough, does not move particularly well on sand. We want to try to understand this. And the way, here's my sort of next technical slide, the way physicists like to understand things is to make simple models. Okay? And there's sort of two approaches. You can take a top-down approach where you say, well, I'm gonna specify high-level dynamics and I'm gonna add detail as needed, or the bottom up, I'm gonna try to account for every component in the organism and see if I can add those together and understand how movement happens. We tend to favor the top-down, and the top-down, there's a long history of doing this. In the 20th century, before, it was the time of pencil and paper theory, things you might have hated in your mathematics classes in school. Into the 40s and to the end of this century, it's been the time of computers, using computers to model animal locomotion, robot locomotion. And into the 2000s, biologists started to realize, basically, based on, I think, the work of Raber, that you could use robots as models to try to understand how living systems move. It turns out, though, that robots have been hard to make, expensive to fabricate, large, bulky, hard to program. It wasn't until the last 10, 15 years, with the advent of controllers and small but powerful servo motors and 3D printers and other additive manufacturing techniques, that physicists, experimental physicists like me, were able to make robots that we could use in the laboratory. Here's one of our early ones, which is a 3D printed shells and a bunch of segments connected by motors, which are driving this thing in a pattern. And this thing makes a mess on our granular material of poppy seeds. And we can use this to explore principles of how best to wiggle the body around move effectively. You can read about that in these papers. More importantly, what we realize is a different way of modeling. This is what we now call robophysics. And we have some papers on this, some scientific papers, and we've also been running a focus session at the Big Physics University. It's 10th anniversary this year. So it's been a very fruitful way to model these things. Okay, well, robophysical models have invaded my lab. I get so many brilliant students at Georgia Tech, and they all love robotics because they all took it in high school and middle school now. And so these things have just proliferated in all sorts of shapes and forms. typically trying to understand a particular biological problem. And they've also graced some of the covers of the premier journals in the field. Okay. Using these robophysical models, we've discovered new principles for how elongate systems can move over complex ground. Here, for example, is a little centipede as it's crawling. And you might notice that a good chunk of its footsteps are not making permanent contact. They sort of stick and they glide a little bit, stick and they glide a little bit. And in fact, we call this terrestrial swimming. And over the last few years, we've developed robophysical models that help us understand the principles of terrestrial swimming. It's like swimming in a fluid, but the propulsive forces are now due to friction. These animals also have limbs that tend to fold passively upon contact with obstacles. And we've put that into these robots, and you can see them fold upon hitting. And these sort of become mechanically intelligent. We're not telling each limb how to fold and when to fold. This thing just does it on its own and basically allows it to move pretty well. The interesting thing is that I'm a physicist and I tend to do things in the laboratory. I had some engineering postdocs who said, I wonder what these things could do outside. So this was Yasmin. She took one of our robophysical models and took it outside. And the interesting thing was that with no brain power, there's nothing controlling and telling the robot that there's a step coming up and an obstacle. It was able to do pretty well. And even into more complicated environments, able to do pretty well. And so we realized that this idea of terrestrial swimming plus mechanical intelligence leads to robust and potentially low-cost, open-loop locomotor performance. The question, of course, becomes, well, that seems good, but you've now built a device, if you're an engineer, with a lot of parts and do you really need that many? And we get asked. And it turns out, and I will blow through this slide, we have a paper which we're very proud of, which basically says, yes, you can indeed use that many legs, use lots of legs, if you want to guarantee that a robot can go from A to B over a bumpy, complex landscape. And the basic idea, you don't have to pay attention to or remember, but it turns out to have a lot in common with the basic idea that allows you to send a signal in the early days over a transatlantic cable and now via Wi-Fi and whatever, robustly and reliably from A to B. We sort of think of it as matter transmission. And we had a paper called Multi-Legged Matter Transporter Framework for Noisy Locomotion, Noisy Landscape, which basically told us that if we build robots with 6 legs or robots with 12 legs, the 6-legged robot can go pretty well if it gets lucky in open loop, not knowing anything about the environment, and go pretty well until things don't go well. Or it could go pretty poorly for good chunks of time. But if you have a sufficient number of legs, you get a redundancy in there, which we can prove says that you can, this is a powerful thing, says that you can get this robot from A to B over a very complicated landscape in a certain amount of time with a certain value. So we have the kind of predictability now that we have for wheeled vehicles on flat terrain. Okay. Now, that's the robophysics. You might be saying, what on earth are we listening to a scientific talk for? Well, here's the next interesting part of the story. I met Philip Benfey, who was a very famous plant biologist at Duke University, a Howard Hughes medical investigator, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, the founder of grassroots genetics, high fidelity genetics, Friendly Bioscience Guard, one of the few high-power academics who's also did quite well for himself entrepreneurially. And he said to me one day, and we were collaborating for many years on plant roots, the basic properties of how plant roots grow into soil. He said to me one day, he was looking at these robophysical models, and I was just thinking they stayed in the lab, and that's all we needed for. He said, maybe these robots could actually solve a problem which is out there, which I knew nothing about, having no agricultural background. He said, there's a major problem in agriculture: pest, weed, and fungus control. There's a decreasing effectiveness of herbicides. There are labor challenges, and the automated solutions that are out there, a couple years back, are large, tractor-based, wheel-based, that can't get into tight spaces. What if, he said, this was his vision. And you'll note, by the way, that he passed away last year. Very sad. So this is really hard to give this talk. But his vision was, what if a swarm of low-cost but robust robots, which could get between low and confined spaces, could autonomously search for weeds and other pests 24/7 and control them? And this was the concept art which one of my graduate students' mothers, who's an artist, cooked up. And the idea is you got a lot of these little robots out there, and there's a weed, and the robot comes up and identifies the weed and removes the weed, and they just do it all day, all night, charge themselves. And if they break repairs, they're cheap. They got lots of legs, so if one leg goes bad, this was the idea, okay? So, you know, we thought this was insane, but, you know, it seemed like fun, and he had experience, and he had good track record in this world. Let's try it. So we started a company, 2021. Myself, Philip, and Daniel Soto, who's actually here at the meeting today, he's setting up a booth right now with one of our robots. And over time, we brought on folks like a former PhD student to do kind of help with engineering and operation consulting. Now we've brought on recently a couple MBAs to help us with customer discovery and commercial development, and some other folks helping with design, and this is now our company called Robotics. Of course, we're leveraging still. We're still a very early startup. We're still working out principles, but we're leveraging the brilliance of the Georgia Tech students who come into my lab and I can. And I want to show you just a couple videos of some of our latest progress. Here is some of our robots now autonomously going around the lab. A little seed funding from the Georgia Research Alliance and an NSF STTR Phase 1. And doing all sorts of crazy gyrations, which we now understand via other kind of mathematics and physics, why certain gyrations and undulations are better and some are worse. And more recently, we've been able to take the cord off the robot, these are our robophysical models, and bring it out into the real world. And this is our first prototype called Major Tom. Ground control robotics, at a certain generation that joke goes, otherwise nobody gets it. It's filled with electric motors and a very cool kind of capstan drive mechanism that allows those kind of wimpy electric and not so costly electric motors to basically get really strong and plow through all sorts of stuff. We've got rudimentary jaws and a weed cutter, and it can do all sorts of cool things. And I'll just let this play for a minute because I think I probably have a little time, right? Okay, cool. I'm almost done. And there it goes, and it's wandering around. And again, the most important thing here is that we have guarantees now. On a sufficiently bumpy landscape, I could say I need this many legs, and we're starting to say, well, suppose I don't want this many legs, what kind of control and sensing do I need? And some other basic research. And we could say, oh, we can get over that terrain at a certain time. Okay. That's the locomotor component. That's what we've been focused on. We are not blind to the fact that these robots are going to have to do something. So we're just starting out. Again, we're just running this on the fumes right now. We're just starting out to integrate sensing and removal. So here we've got some real sense depth cameras on these things, which are relatively low cost. You got jaws, you got the cutting blade. Turns out that one can now basically, not fully, but basically go up to a weed using something called PlantNet, take a picture of it, upload it, or somewhere even you can have it on the thing. And here's an example of one of the robots, Esteban was an undergrad, one of the robots going up to a picture of a goldenrod, and watch this. If it shakes its head, it means it's not. It means it should not spray it. I mean, it should. It doesn't like it, rather. So it saw that autonomously, said that's not a good thing, and then it could eventually do something. What could it eventually do? Well, we're still experimenting. This turns out to be non-trivial. As you all know, you can put a string trimmer on it and let it just tear things up. Everyone's wearing safety glasses in the lab, I'm sure. You can, if you want chemicals, you can pump some stuff out. These things are strong. They can carry sensors. They can carry herbicide, specialty herbicide. And in the last few years, we've begun a collaboration with John Culberson of Five Sons Farm in Jasper, Georgia, who is a blueberry farmer who aspires to organic weeding and does not want chemicals. And so he let us go and try to tear things up in his field. This was our first successful weeding attempt. It's sped up. It was pretty pitiful, but again, running on fumes. But it has an onboard camera to detect things. All right. So again, we're just getting started. We've now, we think, got enough of the basic scientific principles, you know, again, building on the things we've been discovering in my lab. We think we can get robots that can credibly go in complex, tight spaces that no other robots can go. Pests and weeds and whatever else might infest and inhabit your crop field. But we don't really know what we're doing on this, so please reach out to us with ideas, comments, thoughts. And if you want, see our demo of Major Tom in the exhibition hall. And I'll just close by saying there's a little bit of our info. Robophysical models of living systems are entering the real world. This is a new approach combining physics, biology, and engineering, we think. New principles of elongate locomotion in confined, complex terrain. Allow creation of robust, simply controlled, low-cost terrestrial swimmers which are mechanically intelligent. And swarms of these robots, we believe, can operate 24/7 autonomously to assist in the control challenges in crop fields. And with that, let me close and thank you all for allowing me to spend some time here, and I'm around the rest of the day, and happy to chat further.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
Maybe one or two very quick questions if they've got any. Like Daniel said, we'll be around. Any questions?
Yeah.
Just curious.
Just curious why you ended up on legs versus wheels versus tracks.
Yeah.
Is that the most versatile? I mean, what's the background there?
Well, it's interesting, right? So, and I'm happy to talk more about this. What we really want is low profile, right? And so people have tried to make low profile. And that means, something like this that you get in this box. People have tried to do that using limbless devices. You're just not going to get wheel devices. The scaling turns out not to work unless you have lots and lots of wheels. There's a longer story, but you want an elongate kind of thing that can carry a payload but can get in confined spaces. This little trick of adding even rudimentary limbs, small limbs that don't have to be terribly good, allows you to have this kind of capability, this guaranteed capability. That's our story thus far. So it's really driven by trying to make this thing small. And if you make a robot small, it then has to be really good at a robot with few limbs. The wheels has to be really good at figuring out how to climb things and get over things. We think that this kind of elongate system with these legs kind of gives you the ability to both go in small spaces and climb over pretty bumpy things. That's been our kind of thinking.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Daniel. Yes, sir. For sure, if you got any more questions, stick around for them, just so we stay on time and get there.
Yeah.
Very interesting presentation. So up next, we've got Josh Miner, who's the cotton test lead with John Deere Agricultural and Turf, and I think Mary Logan Tossison is going to share part of that presentation, and she's, I don't know your official title. Okay, we'll let it go. She'll forgive me on that one. So title is Save Cost with Increased Productivity with Smart Apply. So with that, I'm going to see, I think that's on and ready to go.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you all for UGA, fruit and vegetable growers. Thank you all for allowing us to come here and talk. Mary Logan and I are probably two of the very few John Deere employees actually from Georgia, residents here, both graduates of UGA. So always cool to come back and be able to speak at a meeting close to home for us, short trip. Right, just to kick it off, my name's Josh Miner. As Wes said, I'm the cotton test lead. I also have responsibility for high-value crops. Really what that means is I work on our agronomy team and help validate, verify solutions as they come to market from an agronomic standpoint, right? Ensure we're not having any agronomic damage or any negative impact from the solutions we bring.
Yeah, I can introduce myself. I am Mary Logan Tostenson, so similar to what Josh does, I also work in cotton, but I have the opportunity to work a little bit closer with our dealer channel. So live in Tifton, cover that area, but work with Flint, Lassiter, Sun South, AgPro, a whole slew of them. But as y'all know, we get to incorporate a few other crops aside from just cotton. So interesting stuff, so peanuts, soybeans, and then obviously opportunities like Smart Apply.
Yeah, awesome. We'll dig in. Let's see if this works.
Did he pull that?
I can advance it from here. So we start pretty much every presentation within John Deere with what's our purpose, right? And our purpose is that we put on a lot, I think by 2030, right, that John Deere customers will be the most profitable, productive, and sustainable farmers in the world through the use of our equipment and technology, right? And usually when we give that message up front, we talk about our products, and it's 3 or 4 products that all come together to meet that goal, Smart Apply is a little bit unique, right? Because it really touches each one of those bullets there and really drives home that profitability, productivity, as well as sustainability on our farms.
I think it might be this one. Let's see. Is it? No, that'll work.
Not at all. That's fine. We can
Yeah.
advance. But just super quick today, we're going to give you a very high-level overview of what Smart Apply is, what it does. We'll touch on what are the components, so what are the parts that make up that system, how does that system work overall. We'll talk a little bit about what are the results we've seen in the field, right? How is it more productive? How is it more profitable? How is it more sustainable? And then finally, we'll really point you to where you can find more information, right? We have a number of dealers across the Southeast that have that contract to sell this product. So we'll kind of tell you where they are at and point you in their direction. But with that, I will hand it over to Mary Logan for a little bit.
So I think the easiest way to explain things sometimes is a quick visual. So in this video, you're going to see a couple of different systems, a couple of different crops, but at the core of it, you're going to see the Smart Apply system. I'm going to play this, and then we'll kind of get into the components and actually what it's doing based on this video. So obviously that was just a quick overview. Got to see this system working a little bit and saw some of the spot spraying, which I will get into. But as you see, Josh and I like to break things down very simply. There's a lot of complex terms and a lot of acronyms in John Deere, and sometimes we like to break it down a little bit. So as you can see, you have two boxes. You have I guess on your right, or my right, your left, with smaller dots. And then you have one on the other side with a little bit bigger dots. Same area, so maybe covering a square acre, square block, whatever you want to say. But the theory of this is if you're spraying with a conventional sprayer, you're going to spray that same area, the same amount of product in that same area. So in the areas where you see more gaps, maybe you can't see my mouse, but where the smaller circles are, you're going to have a lot more wasted product. It's not going to be hitting those trees, bushes, whatever the crop is. Versus on the box closest to me, those larger circles, that product is going to hit it, it's going to be there. But the idea here is with Smart Apply, how can we optimize the system? How can we know that on the circles that are a little bit smaller there, how can we detect the density and the size of trees, bushes, whatever, to be able to save down on products. So that might be like a small tree versus a large tree per se. Let's see. Getting a little bit into the components of Smart Apply. So what is it? You saw the spray system, but what is the meat or what is the brain operation? There's a ton going on here, but I'll kind of break it down piece by piece. And again, feel free to ask questions to Josh and I a little bit later on if you would like. So you see GPS for speed and coverage map. So you got to be able to have that global positioning system to be able to know where you're at, to know where the system's at. A LiDAR sensor. I would like to say that this is what kind of is the brain of the operation or the first step to be able to generate the spray and for that spray to, the LiDAR sensor to be able to detect and know how much spray is supposed to go out. A display. You've got to have something in the cab to be able to detect and monitor as you're going through that field. Spray volume algorithms. So that LiDAR sensor is sending out its signal and it's bouncing back, and then immediately, instantaneously, you're getting spray volume algorithms to be able to spray that out there. So you have spray nozzle controllers. That might not necessarily be the most like fun and shiny, but back behind that gray box. Nozzle solenoids. Josh is going to talk a little bit about this more about pulse width modulation and what we can accomplish with that. And then an air filtration for the LiDAR lens, keeping that clean, making sure that we're getting accurate sensing. And then across the top in the gray boxes are what it takes to be able to do this. So exclusive license of USDA technology, a John Deere API license. So essentially that is exclusive to John Deere, tablet-based interface, and then LiDAR sensing of the canopy, talk through that with the sensor, and then again, pulse width modulation nozzles to spray it. So a few images, again, like to be able to kind of say, hey, what is this doing? So the pictures closest to me are the system actually mounted. The top pictures are, hey, what does this look like with just our visual spectrum? And the bottom pictures are when that LiDAR sensor is going through and detecting. So you see different colorations, which comes from density, size, and where that sprayer will know how to spray based on the LiDAR sensing. So just some cool talking points and kind of giving an idea about, again, breaking it down simply, overview of how this system works. So the LiDAR sensor spins, so as you're driving through that orchard or field, spins and collects 27,000 data points per second, which is a lot. And that sensor is scanning 270 degrees left to right of rear tractor tires. So based on the program or based on the technology, we're not looking behind the tractor tires, but 270 degrees, so really good visibility. And then individual nozzle zones. So this is important because rather than when that LiDAR sensor spits out that sensing and it's read back and just spraying that whole canopy like a conventional system, you're going to have individual nozzles cut on or individual nozzle zones that cut on. That was kind of shown in the first video if you saw spray nozzles turn on, spray nozzles turn off, and that's essentially where our savings are going to come from and understand that. So we'll talk a little bit about PWM.
Yeah, we'll touch on just PWM valves really quickly, right? Pulse width modulation. Essentially all it is that solenoid you see up there, and it's a plunger. And it's opening, closing. On this system here, it's 10 hertz. That means 10 times per second. And it is a critical part here. It's really common on our row crop sprayers, kind of high boy sprayers now, but it's critical for, first of all, controlling that on-off, right? Getting a more reactive response time. When that system tells it to shut off, it's also critical for maintaining a rate, right? And gives you a little bit more speed flexibility to hold a consistent rate with other variables that might happen within that field. We'll keep trucking along, right? We said kind of the so what, the results. And we touched on profitable, right? And hopefully you can see from what Mary Logan discussed, the opportunity for profitable is a little bit self-explanatory there, right? If that LiDAR sensor does not see a tree in that spray path, it will shut off the associated nozzle, saving product between trees, between vines, between really any crop that it would run through and could sense. There, it's also going to measure that tree size, right? So if you go through and just driving through like I do, you see we like to use perfect little circles. Nobody's fields look like that, right? There's variability within that size. So it will actually adjust that rate based on that LiDAR reading to apply the appropriate amount for the individual tree that it scans as it's going through. I put under profitability as well the access to the data. And we'll touch on data a little bit more, but we are conventionally send a machine to a field, right, to do a job. And it does that job. We're now unlocking the capabilities to send the machine to a field to do a job, but also collect information about that field. And we'll show a little bit about what that looks like, how Smart Apply reports that back. But it's an opportunity to get a little deeper glance into your operation through some of this data. The productivity one, we're not going to go into too many details on, right? But it's if you're saving product out of that tank, that means you're getting more acres per tank, right? 50% savings equals double the amount of acres covered on a single tank, right? And we've heard some stories of people being able to reduce headcount from tendering, from being able to bring people that are running chemical, running water tanks on their operations. So we always focus on cost savings because that's the fun one, but there is a huge productivity upside as well as hiring that labor. And the last piece here is sustainability, right? Reducing drift, we see that chemical runoff, which we'll touch on a little bit deeper, that 87% reduction in chemical drift, right? That's applying the correct amount of product to the correct size of that tree as well as shutting off between trees. And we'll touch on a little bit that chemical runoff, right, and what we've seen. And it's all great for us to come up here and say, hey, we're going to save you a ton of money on chemistry, right? And if the chemistry doesn't have good efficacy, it really doesn't matter, right? So we've done some studies internally within John Deere that have proven really no statistical difference between Smart Apply and a conventional blast sprayer. I believe UJ has also conducted some similar research, so I will not speak to their results. I will invite you to ask them about that. But I do want you, and I introduced myself on purpose there, right? We validated, we verified this system does not have an agronomic downside in the field. And we've actually seen some cases of improved efficacy and coverage due to varying that rate, right? Part of that's that PWM valve. We get better spray coverage through that PWM as it's pulsing. The other part here is applying the correct amount on that tree reduces a lot of what we see this loss here, right? You can see on the bottom part of this on the screen here, as we go through what's a proper amount of coverage, what's getting a little bit too high on the far right, you can see that rate is so high it is actually running off those leaves, right? By continually varying that rate, applying the appropriate amount for the size of that tree or the density of that tree, we've actually seen more consistent coverage across varying sizes within those fields. And then the last piece I'll touch on here is the data, right? We mentioned that. I think a John Deere API license was there. All of this data is accessible in a Smart Apply cloud. Is there FMIS or farm management software? All that data also comes right through to Operations Center, which is our John Deere platform we use. So if we look up here, we're just showing a few of these metrics, right? But even something as simple as what speed are my operators running at, right? We can collect that off our tractors. This will also give it off that GPS system to say, hey, I want you to stay below this miles per hour, this speed. Are your operators actually doing that? We've seen one of the big benefits. We also get those as applied rates. So you can see how many total gallons am I applying on this acre? What's the total acreage covered within there? And then the last piece on the bottom side, this is actually from the app or from the tablet that's in the cab while you're operating that. So it's showing you which nozzles are shut off in red, which ones are green on both sides of that sprayer. But it's also collecting data on those trees as you're going through. And I use trees loosely, right? This is approved for trellis environments, bushes, anything with mass and density in a field that you would run through with a blast sprayer, right? But it's collecting tree height, tree width, tree size, and you're able to produce that data back and get reports on crop health, right? How are they aging, different metrics across the year. So I think we're probably getting close on time. Last thing I'll plug here, I say last time like 100 times every presentation I give, so this one's the actual last slide. We're up here, as Mary Logan and I both said, we share responsibilities. We're cotton and get into this. Our dealers do have the contract and they have really local relevant data on how it performs here in Georgia, right? So hopefully you recognize some of the names up here, Everglades, Flint, Lassiter, Blanchard Equipment, all have the contract to sell Smart Apply and have experience with those in their local crops, their local environments. Last thing I'll say, I told you, last thing. This is not limited to John Deere equipment, right? This can go on, it is a retrofittable kit to, say, nearly any blast sprayer model. We have a really flexible engineering team within Smart Apply that can really get that configuration up and running with your system, and it's not tied to a John Deere tractor. So if you run a Kubota or a New Holland tractor, you can still get this exact same system on your air blast sprayer, mounted in there, run through the tablet in the cab. Yep.
So what I didn't understand, is this a closed loop system in the sense I understand with the LiDAR sensor and the variable rate application,
Right.
you target the right plants? Do you also then monitor the results? You mentioned the speed of the tractor, of course also if there's wind, so you might be targeting the right plants, but you might miss them all. So is there a closed system where you also measure the results and accordingly adjust the sprayer, respectively also the speed of the tractor?
So we are not controlling the speed of the tractor. The GPS on there is solely intended to capture speed as we go. So you say the speed varies and we're capturing that LiDAR image. How do we ensure that we're applying that correct rate at the right time is the basis of the receiver being on the implement there. You don't look like that answered your question. So we are not controlling tractor speed at all.
Controlling the results. So you will not measure somehow if both I targeted out the right spot of the plant, and then you've got the pest on it, but you don't capture via your sensor all the spray.
The response, no, we don't.
Hit the area which I really wanted to hit.
No.
So you're not that far. So is there any player out there who already does this, or?
That doesn't, so I know, there is a third-party group. I'm not blanking on it because I'm standing in front of a group and don't want to promote other people's stuff. I'm truly blanking on it. There are other competitors that do a similar system as this. None that I know of measure, we saw this, did we hit it? Yeah. Yep. That's part of the fun of my role is we get to go out and put spray cards and measure data and check efficacy on these sprays.
And this system is also on gas, which you're partnered up with gas, I believe, the autonomous spray for orchards. That system is there on that machine.
Correct. We are working to integrate smart apply technology onto Gus. Yep.
I can do one more question, I think.
Is this something you consider growers can apply to the tractor and the sprayer fully on their own, or do you recommend that like needing dealer support to do this, or how complicated is it really to get set up on something?
So it depends on the operation. I'd say your first one, you probably need dealer support and a setup crew there. I have worked with some folks down in Florida that they're able to install their own because they've kind of huddled around, and watched what that dealer did to install. Not a complex system to install. It's just that first one's always the most challenging. Right.
All right. So I'm assuming both of y'all be around or at least one of y'all be around at the end of the session,
Yeah,
right?
we're good.
All
Should
right,
be-
perfect. Thank y'all. So we're going to move on to our next speaker, which is Katarina Lee. She's a regional crop care manager with Ecorobotix, and she's going to talk about AI-driven spot spraying with Ecorobotix.
Good afternoon. My name is Katarina Lee, and I'm going to talk to you today about the company Ecorobotix. My background and career has been agronomy in high-value vegetable and fruit crops. Just by a show of hands, who's joining us today? Any local growers? Anyone want to volunteer? Just put your hand up. No? I'm guessing everyone else is just curious about technology then. It's probably a safe bet. See some head nods. All right. So we're going to focus on the ultra-high precision spot sprayer, which we call ARA, that utilizes AI technology. And if you're not already familiar with the company, we're Swiss-based, offering the robotic solutions designed to reduce ecological impact in agriculture. We have almost 200 employees who are based in Switzerland and the United States, and our headquarters here in the States are in Pasco, Washington. So the company was founded in 2014 with its first prototype, and it evolved by improving the design to include a spray boom that was 80 inches with 52 nozzles on it, all spaced 1.5 inches from each other. And this here was then based on the driving speed that was considered autonomous, and it was regardless of how many weeds were present. So fast forward to 2021, when the current spray design was released, adapting to more stringent regulations, no longer competing with other OEMs. And ours is not just a weeding implement, it's actually a complete solution from pre-planting through harvesting. It can be found in over 15 countries now. So just like some of the other presenters today, rather than telling you about ARA, let me show you.
ARA, the ultra-precise sprayer from Ecorobotix, is a concrete response to the problems encountered by farmers. Thanks to its artificial intelligence, application rates are drastically reduced by up to 95%, allowing for considerable reduction in the cost of phytoproducts, increase in crop yields, and the preservation of the environment. Its ultra-precise crop protection technology is revolutionary. This 20-foot wide machine is equipped with 156 nozzles spaced 1.57 inches apart, which can be adjusted in height from 6.3 to 22 inches. Each nozzle is equipped with a solenoid valve, which opens and closes in a fraction of a second. The vision system consists of high-resolution cameras equipped with a flash to even out the brightness captured in the images. At a speed of 4.7 miles per hour, it detects its target thanks to its plant-by-plant recognition algorithms and then sprays the area to be treated to a precision of 2.4 by 2.4 inches. For example, in row crops such as sugar beets, rapeseed, green beans, onions, cotton, corn, and many more. The spraying is protected by a soft cover system, massively reducing drift due to wind. A standard output of 10 acres per hour is achieved. The system works perfectly in the middle of the night, which increases the daily area treated up to around 240 acres. Our technology is also able to select the crop only for selective fungicides and insecticide spraying. The user controls the Aura sprayer via the Ecorobotix mobile app on a supplied tablet. The data collected during the mission generates a report that indicates, among other things, the rate of weeds treated or the quantity of product used. A 160-gallon water tank is carried on the front, and the spray mixture is mixed in an 80-gallon tank. After the first treatment, the application tells you how much mixture you need to prepare to complete the job in a given area. Aura weighs nearly 1.3 tons and consists of 3 modules of about 7 feet each. The 2 outer elements fold to transport width of 9.2 feet for road travel. With this state-of-the-art technology, Aura allows significant operating cost reductions while increasing environmental protection in a wide range of applications, both in row crops and in grasslands. Aura, the ultra-high precision sprayer from Ecorobotix.
So I'm going to show you another video, and if you're like me, it's one of those things that you have to see it to believe it, so I appreciate you guys playing those videos earlier. So the second one here, oh, might have opened it a few times. No, it won't play a few times. Exit out of that before the next video plays. But I invite you to go out to our YouTube channel and go through those videos. I wanted to show things that weren't necessarily like on a presentation that you didn't have access to. I think it'll be perfect. What you're looking to see better and better resolution or on your phone or show your friends. Jumping into why this could benefit your operation and at a high level how the technology works. So if it wasn't already obvious, labor reduction of manual weeding is critical. At the same time, a significant reduction of agrichem that's been used due to spot spraying. You know, we've heard feedback that based on these 2 points alone, Aura provides quick ROI, and by not applying a broadcast, post-planting herbicide that causes a phytotoxic response, the crop establishes faster and stronger, leading to increased yield. So these results are all attributed to AI camera processing technology, identifying weeds versus crop, allowing for a wide range of application types. Very simply, the cameras move over the crop, identifying target versus non-target crops and weeds, then activates the associated placed nozzles. The processing time is equivalent to the blink of an eye. Our application types displayed left to right are selective herbicides, non-selective herbicides, crop-targeted fungicides or insecticide, foliar nutrients, pre-emergent herbicides, and then what's not displayed on here is also the ability to do a standard broadcast complete coverage application. So for more options, stop by the Lassiter booth and learn more, and we'll explain what kind of applications you can do with Aura. The detection is actually for weeds as small as a 1/16 of an inch, and then for the crop sizes about 3/4 of an inch in size, which is equivalent to about 2 to 4 true leaves. And just to explain what Aura can do here, it was founded by a farmer for farmers, so knowing needing to get the job done. And so we can see max rates at about 4.5 miles per hour with quality efficacy, matching or surpassing the current industry standards for spraying. So getting into some of the trial work that Ecorobotix has done, we conducted an onion trial in 2023 that compared our applications to grower standard post-planting, so that happened in March, and we went through to harvest in August. What you'll see is the crop was in the ground for about 147 days, and that top bar, which I'll reference in this image in the next slides, are our applications. There were 5, and grower standard of herbicide applications was actually 9, which is that bottom green triangle timeline. So we got some great images here. What you'll see is an untreated control on the far left, 2 different sections of ARA of treatments that were contained, and then the grower standard here on the far right. The top row of photos is 7 days after the 3rd treatment of the season for ARA and post 4 treatments for that grower standard. The major call out is looking at the crop itself is established better with stronger and larger plants than grower standard at this point in time. And this was due to the fact that it was not done through a broadcast spray that causes phytotoxicity and makes that stunting of the plants. So weed control was continued for about 20 days post-treatment for ARA while the grower made another 3 applications. And that's referenced right there on that top bar that you can look at. So continuing through the growing season, the grower standard development did finally catch up. So plants did finally size out. Let's see, and that happened at about 90 days post-planting, just for correlation of what you saw in the previous pictures. And the bottom row are the images of the plants that were right prior to harvest. So what are the kind of takeaways from this? Trial results concluded that the spot spray applications provided an opportunity for the undercrop to establish faster and stronger than the grower standard. Herbicides that were used were significantly reduced, and I think what the most exciting potential with using ARA showcased an increase in yield with a larger crop size that were more consistent in size and comparable to what the grower expectations would be. The list of supported crops is growing constantly, and that's actually part of my job. So if there's a crop that you're interested in, come and stop by and let us know what you're looking to add in terms of algorithms that are supported by the machine. And just the top takeaways from what we talked about here today, reducing labor and agrichem costs, quick ROI, increased crop health and yield, and multi-mode applications using ARA. So thank you for your time and attention. Oh, got away scot-free.
No, you didn't.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
How many cameras are there for the detection?
Sure. So there's 2 camera boxes per hood, and there's actually 2 different cameras in each box. There's an RGB camera, and there's a motion camera as well.
Do you ever have to recalibrate the cameras so that you can make sure that you're turning the correct sprayers on at the correct time?
You know, I actually don't know the answer to that, so I apologize. But if you stop by, I'll find out and tell you what that is.
Yes, we need to calibrate. If we move the position of the camera or the bar, then you need to calibrate. Otherwise, you don't need to calibrate all the time.
You showed that they can move up for transport, and I was wondering if that might cause jostling or anything like that.
That's not required.
Thank you.
So you just opened the door. You thought you were all.
So how are you serving the North American market? Do you have a direct sales model or via independent dealers?
We're going through dealer network.
Okay, and how many dealers do you have out there?
I believe, is it 6, or is it more than that? I apologize, Marcus, I don't know the answer to that. It is 6, yeah.
6, so you're still building up that dealer network.
In the network itself, but I mean distribution throughout. I'm based out in California and Arizona, and so there's multiple locations that service there in the PNW as well. Lassetter's the one here,
Anybody else?
or Lasseter, excuse me.
So I saw where you had cotton in the beta phase. What does that mean, and have you seen this used in cotton fields?
Oh, okay. So what beta means is that it hasn't gone to a commercial offering yet, and so it's available to all growers that have access to ARA. It's not perfected, right? Anything that's in a beta phase has gone through what we do is image acquisition. It's gone through alpha testing, but we're needing to go and test it more, and so hopefully in a commercial application setting. Are we looking to use it would be from an herbicide application perspective, but that doesn't limit it, because I'm thinking if you did spray on the crop, then you could isolate just that crop area and not the surrounding. So I think it just depends on what applications are most interesting to you.
Interesting, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any more questions before we turn it over?
Does it create like a weed report after the application?
Oh, interesting. No, not to my knowledge, but I think that's actually some interesting feedback that we could take back to the team.
Thank you. And you'll be around. And we
Absolutely.
got one more speaker left, and so then after that speaker, we'll kind of open the floor. We'll turn the lights back on and get it lively again.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Taylor. How do you pronounce your last name? Wetley. Make sure I get that right. And he's discussing solar-powered spot spraying with Solinftec. So let me get you pulled up.
Thank you, Wes, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank as well Luan and the team at Tifton UGA for inviting us out here to speak. I'm going to talk a little bit about Solinftec overall as a company, where we're kind of positioned within the industry right now, and how we've grown over the last several years. Specifically, a lot of what we are currently doing with the Solix platform is applicable to row crops such as cotton, corn, and soybeans, and then sugarcane down in Brazil as well. However, as we grow, we're exploring a lot of crops that could be more applicable in this region. So just as a general overview of Solinftec, so we've been around close to now 18 years, originally started in Brazil actually by Cuban engineers. And what they came to do when they started actually was automate the process that's happening at the sugarcane mill. So what they quickly realized early on that the issue with that was actually getting the product, the sugarcane, to the mill. So some of our early solutions were focused around fleet management and actually keeping that steady flow of sugarcane to the mill. You can see as we've grown specifically within sugarcane in Brazil and South America, we have close to 95% of the market now, monitoring with onboard computers and other technology, around 100,000 machines throughout the Western Hemisphere. And so just more of a visual of how we've grown there. You can see a lot of our focus early on automation within sugarcane, within fleets. Quickly we grew into row crops, so corn and soybeans, and then into other crops as well, still around fleet efficiency, but around different crops like citrus as well. And then in actually 2019, we expanded and grew into the U.S. market. So we're headquartered out of West Lafayette, Indiana, which is where I'm at. And a lot of our solutions there were, again, focused on fleet efficiency, but specifically in corn and soybeans, and particularly in the Midwest. Across all of those solutions, really, you can see that a lot of them are focused on efficiencies, but what we were missing is what's going on at an agronomic level. And so that's really what I'm going to talk a little bit more about, is our autonomous Solix platform and how a lot of that agronomic data gets fed into all of these systems. And here's just one more visual of the company's footprint. We work very closely with Purdue University in West Lafayette in a variety of different ways with our platform. And so kind of zeroing more in on Solix. So it was really born from the concept that agronomy should be a daily chore. If we think back to 100 years ago, what our great-great-grandparents may have been doing, they were often going through the field and continuously maintaining the field. While they're at the field, they're obviously gathering a number of different scouting insights as well, seeing what issues in regard to maybe emergence or crop health are going on in that field. But they're also maintaining that field as well, often mechanical back then. And so what we first began with the platform was creating a two-prong autonomous robot in the field. So solving the application piece and then as well as the scouting. So creating an autonomous agronomist and applicator in the field. And so up here on the screen, we can kind of see one of our early versions of the platform doing strictly scouting. So you can see solar powered, but going across the field and creating that digital twin in the field. We had created a digital twin operationally throughout operations, but not actually in the field. And so you can see on the right here some of the things that we're collecting and some of the specifics of the robot. We're going slow and methodical through the field, but while we're there, we're gathering a number of different data. Pinpointing where exactly each individual weed is in the field, understanding actual crop stage and overlaying that with different parameters such as growing degree days as we're collecting weather information as well, and overall plant nutrition. And so what that looks like from the camera perspective, through our Alice AI, you can see on the left here, we're doing just a simple stand count, so identifying that where we can actually make different replant decisions based on what we're seeing there. And then on the, looks like our other video isn't working, but in this other video right here, we're actually geo-referencing where each individual weed is at in the field. And so as we create that overall digital experience, you can see we have both a mobile app and web page. Up here, the goal is to have a really close connection digitally with the field. And so you can see exactly where that robot is and how it is progressing on its mission. It's taking lots of different photos, so you can actually click on different photos and ground truth those and actually go out in the field and see different weeds. And then obviously there's different weed pressure maps from there. One piece that is evolving within the AI is actually identifying what weeds are out there. Right now we're just identifying and beginning this season broadleaf versus grass. However, in the future, we're going to actually be identifying specific weeds as the AI evolves, so you'll actually understand what percentage of your weeds in the field are that specific weed. And so as we kind of just compare this to maybe more traditional scouting versus the Solix-enabled scouting, you can see how those kind of compare to each other. We have that geofenced where, often, your really good agronomists are having difficulties getting across all of those acreage. The robot is a tool for them to get across more acreage and also to have more in-depth scouting at those fields. It's hard to actually go over every single plant like a robot allows. And so the second layer of this is the application piece. Really, this did start as just a scouting, but while we were there scouting, it was very obvious early on that why don't we actually execute on those tasks upon some of that data that we're collecting. So that is where the application was born from. So each of our commercial models is doing both scouting and application, and this is a visual of our 23 commercial model. And so what you're looking at there is 4 solar panels on the top with a 40-foot boom on the front. We're still, again, doing all of those different scoutings. We have 14 cameras and sensors in total. That could be increased over time, but obviously we're trying to focus on giving enough data that we can have actionable insights and don't overload the customers. With that 40-foot boom, we have 8 cameras across there. Each camera controls 3 nozzles, and each nozzle has a controller, so we have independent nozzle control. Think of this as your rolling residual in the field. And now you can also kind of see some of these, again, items that we're doing with the spray piece of it. There's obviously an optimization of product, but when you're making multiple passes with the smaller unit, you can actually get on that acreage earlier and spray on those weeds when they're smaller. Water hemp at, an inch is a lot easier to kill at 6 inches. So a visual of that concept you can see right here. And so this particular use case is in soybeans, but you can see we want to even be in the field scouting and understanding what's happened as early as even before emergence. There's a lot of data that is there and that can be collected. But you can see here, going over that acreage continuously, our sweet spot typically, particularly in the Midwest, in these crop types, it can obviously vary upon region, but it's getting over that acreage of roughly every 7 to 10 days and controlling those weeds in that way. Once we obviously get to canopy, that is where we're shading out a lot of those weeds, and we can kind of rely on the plant to take over control then. However, we can still scout in those use cases as well and collect different agronomic information. Here's just another visual of the AI actually working. You can see our tank level and pressure. The system will also auto level in the field as well, because we do have dual tanks, which I did not highlight, but we have 2 tanks on the underside there. And then you can see in here, we have different settings within Alice where we can be more conservative or liberal with the product being applied. So if we want to overspray a little bit, we would adjust that 127 setting down or up. But you can see we're doing a 7-point check, and once we see those pink dots, that's when we're actually firing those nozzles and making those applications. And so just another visual, I'm sure you guys can obviously compare in your head that broadcast versus targeted application. But here's just another visual of that. Obviously, with something autonomous, there's that reduction in cost, but really the key point here still is that early and often application of a smaller unit and what it allows. And so as we kind of look to what we are doing commercially right now in the market, currently we're concentrated in the Midwest. However, we are exploring Georgia here and the crop types that could be applicable with this product. But here's just a visual of our growth here. So you can see, particularly in 2023 was our commercial launch at a limited scale. But we had 14 robots running in Indiana and Illinois. The additional 5 there are running up in Canada. And then this last season that we just wrapped up, we had 50 units running across Indiana and Illinois. And going into next season, we will be expanding west into Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, and a couple other states there. And so just getting into a little bit of the data here in 2023, we obviously kept this running in more controlled fields, not as much challenging fields, but particularly in this region as well, it was drier. So you can see across those 14 sprayers running across 3,700 acres. What's really interesting to think about, we're used to gallons per acre. We actually have more acres than gallons in this use case, which is kind of a crazy thought, but close to a 90% optimization of post-herbicide in this use case. And then looking into 2024, these 44 customer robots you can see running here, much more challenging season this year was wetter in Indiana and Illinois, more late emerging weeds, but still a very good reduction for the customer in product there. And so what's really interesting to think about in doing more with less is the opportunity when you have something scouting in the field and a number of insights with there. The whole goal of having something scouting there is to be able to do actionable insights to ultimately increase yield. Saving on herbicides, you know, that can pencil out in a lot of ways, but really what the ultimate goal with this platform and having something living at the fields is to increase yield. And so here you can just see when we just compare targeted application versus broadcast, some yield opportunity. On the right, we have broadcast applied, and then on the left, we have targeted applied. And you can just see some visuals on the right there as those kind of compare. In this particular field in Brazil, this did equate to a 9% difference in pods as we compare the grower broadcast applied versus Solix applied. This ultimately also amounted to a difference in test weight, and at the end of the day, also a difference in yield. And so a lot of this data is very early. There's a lot of different variables in there, but there's a lot of opportunity when we compare the plant not been happened to metabolize product, but also when you can really closely manage that field through different scouting information and make different decisions. There we go. And so really to wrap here, what really makes this all move together as we think about optimizing labor is the refill piece of this. And also when we think about having smaller tanks and scouting, but having that scouting going on and all that information, there needs to be opportunities as well to apply, whether that be micros, biologicals, fungicides, other things like that that have a higher rate. And so a key piece of that is our auto refill station, which will not be commercially available until 2026. Our current customers, some of them will be using them in this season, but going into 26, they'll be commercially available. So really think about, you know, if you've seen a military jet refuel in air, this is a much slower, dumbed down version of this, but what we have is 250 modular tanks, 250 gallons. And that tank on the left there that you saw earlier was what would perform the clean out, and then the right is where we would have that herbicide mix in there. And so let me just play that one more time for you. Maybe not. But the entire idea with that is allowing larger application of larger products as we think about our limiting factor often with bigger machines being time. When you have something continuously at the field, can you split rate, apply a fungicide or a micro or a biological at the optimal time horizon in the growing season? And so as we look towards the future, this is, again, going to be limitedly available in the market in 2025, but scaling across additional states. Really, the goal, again, is to continue to evolve this product as it is malleable, work together with our customers in that growth, and expand to new markets. And obviously, the big piece, again, on the bottom here is less human contact and becoming more autonomous in the field. I'll be around later if there's any questions, or I can take a couple now if anybody has any.
Does anybody have questions specifically for Taylor right now? A couple. We'll start in the back and I'll work back forward.
I'm just wondering about the potential of adding new crops and how long does it take to train your model for new growing systems?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, it is a little bit dependent on different crops. Different ones can have a longer AI training time horizon. However, typically how that works is once we do allocate and work towards a new crop, that can take usually in the 6 to 12 month range of training that. However, kind of how we're positioned as well in Brazil, in the U.S., there's that opportunity to train throughout the entire season. The model can evolve quicker as we think about having growing season in Brazil in our wintertime. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the concept of creating a digital twin. Have y'all applied any what-if analyses to that data to actually substantiate a true digital twin?
Yeah, so we have in actually kind of more applicable to some of our other solutions. So we've created with our sugarcane customers as well as our ag retail customers a digital twin of their operations, pulling in sprayer, spreader, truck, average apply time, and then we actually use our AI to model that schedule. And so we can compare that schedule as a simulation versus what actually happened with the robot. We're not doing much of that yet, but I think we definitely will down the road. And those are all built into the same system.
Any other questions? Generally, all right. Before we turn to panel discussion, or y'all run out, this session I've been really pleased with this session. What we've done is over the past 2 or 3 years, I feel like it's grown and changed kind of dynamically. We've called it the Innovations in Industry panel, and we tell our speakers we want to hear something cool, cutting edge, but you better not give us a sales pitch. And I think we need to give all our speakers in here another round of applause today, because I think they all did excellent with that. I'm very impressed with what the information that we were given today and the way it was given. I don't feel like I got a single sales pitch. I got to learn a lot about a lot of advanced specialty crop ag technology that's out there. So hopefully you all guys got that too and had those interactions. So I just wanted to say that before we took off out of here. Now, if you want, again, we'll just open the floor for a few minutes. If anybody just wants any general discussion, you had any ideas that come up during it, anything like that. So I've got the mic. Just raise your hand. If you got any questions, we'll work around.
Thanks so much for the presentations. They were fantastic and super interesting. I'm wondering if anybody can speak to the implications of precision spray for things like the composition of the pesticides and the adjuvant systems that are used with them versus traditional.
So with what we're dealing with is kind of what the industry is calling targeted application. However, most labels, particularly with what we're dealing with right now, are labeled as either a broadcast or a spot application. So we still have to follow the broadcast application, so same carrier rate and everything that comes with that. I know as an industry, there's a lot of movement towards targeted application and what those labels can allow, but there's not really a standard for that yet. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but maybe gives you an idea.
Anything else? Glenn? Oh, I'll come back. Glenn, next.
So a hot button question, but who owns the data? Is it the farmers? Is it the companies? Is it open source? I'm curious what y'all think.
Who wants that question? Nobody? Everybody want to run out?
Yeah,
I'll answer that, and I'll actually point you to a website. It's johndeere.com/trust. We lay it all out there. My abbreviation of that is the farmers own their data in every sense. They do have the option to share that with John Deere. Sharing that is not us diving through their data. It's how can we leverage data to offer better solutions for that grower in the area. But farmers do absolutely own their data unless that is agreed to be shared with John Deere.
Anybody else? All right. You said you had it.
Well, this is just kind of an off-the-wall question, but for a while you heard so much about electrostatic spraying, and there was a lot of work in that area. Now no one's talking about that. It's all see and spray technology. Any thoughts on reasons why?
I mean, I've dabbled in both of those, and I would say one is effective application on every part of every plant, and the other one is only applying to the specific plants of interest. So, I mean, it's a whole different direction, same kind of thing. I mean, we still don't, and that we haven't talked too much different about fungicides versus herbicides and, you know, pesticide stuff. So we haven't yet found a spot sprayer that'll target individual insects. So I think if you're applying in a different, or a different activity, then maybe it's a different discussion.
I know that y'all are aware of the weeds, that there are a lot of weeds with resistance. Palm amaranth here is very bad, hard to kill. I was just wondering of all the herbicide groups or weed control groups, are y'all looking at things like weed resistance and you know, the size of the weed when you're applying? Do you apply more, or just how you're addressing the weeds that are really resistant to herbicides already?
So for Ecorobotix particularly, and probably for spot spraying, it opens the possibility for you to spray different products that are not reaching the crop. So you have a broader possibility of rotation of groups, and that helps a lot with the resistance.
We've had the luxury of being involved in some of the research work that's out there. I know Texas A&M, North Carolina State, I believe the USDA involved with North Dakota State are all doing some deep dive work on resistant weeds that may or may not catalog which weeds we have to do more of that, and in what geographies and what stage the weed is in when that happens. So I know, and USDA Beltsville also is doing some of that work. So I don't know if the answer is there for us yet to know how much to put on there.
I don't need the microphone, but to kind of piggyback on that thought process, if you're able to identify it at a cotyledon stage, it really shouldn't be the hardest chemistries out there that you're applying, right? It's just the idea that you're killing those green leaves. So the earlier that you can get in there, detect, and apply, obviously the better. So then you're not getting to a 2-leaf, let alone 3 or 4-leaf stage where you're getting the resistance that you're seeing with other chemistries. So maybe changing the mindset of when you apply and how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I always love the palm amaranth because it's the hardest. I mean, it grows 2 inches a day. So it's very, in fact, it's, you know, it's hard to control even once you know you're applying for it. So, you know, yeah, that's the thing, is like if you can detect the size of the weed and identify what it is, you have a little bit better chance of understanding how much you need to put on it, what to put on it. So I was just curious as to if you had thought about that, or if it was something you're looking to go forward.
Yeah, come stop by, we'll talk about it more.
I have 2 more questions. Who are they?
So when it comes to precision farming, respectively autonomy, pest management, respectively crop care is, of course, at the forefront with its developments. If you go to those innovation shows, You usually see side-by-side application. Ecorobotix is usually also there. So you see See and Spray, of course. You also see lots of mechanical weeding applications. And then what's very interesting is laser as well. Does anyone have an opinion in the sense of, like, going forward, will you see all those three applications, or is it especially with the biogenetics developments, will it be spray which will be the leading application going forward? Does anyone have a strong opinion on that? Maybe Taylor?
So the question is, do you think a certain avenue is going to be...
Why are you in spray and not in laser?
Particularly, we have done some things with laser. Here, take it. We have done some things with laser, but some of our, with us having a smaller model and wanting to stay lightweight, there's a lot of energy requirements that we thought application and solar would be a good avenue. But really, the model with spraying as well. Obviously, herbicide's the big one that we can start to see the ROI with early on, but we want to get into more of those later applications of nutritionals and things like that. And so that's why we're really focused on the spray piece of it.
It's versatility which you see this.
Yeah. And I don't think you just
stronger.
together.
As a cost question-wise, at least are most probably too expensive for our model.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's also about, like, I'm not sure we can put it in the same bucket because of what he said, like he's more versatile. It's not just a weeding machine, like the spot sprayer is actually a more broad occupation. But also the window where we can use the machines is completely different, and also the speed. So, and also the precision. So the lasers, they are much more precise normally than the chemicals. However, they are too slow, and they are in a very narrow window. We cannot go from 3 or 4 true leaves ahead. We already don't have control over the winds. So it's, I think it's you cannot put it in the same bucket. It's like probably complementary technology, even though we don't want to have everything in your car because it might be too expensive. But it's different.
Just like that's a good point you made, like about the trade shows and the sprayers, like like laser weeders. But what the data is showing is that the technology is going where the hand labor is going as well. So right now there's a lack of hand labor for harvesting, for example. So there's a lot of research and development on harvesting robots as mechanical weeders as well, because organic operations, they're being increased. So I think spraying and mechanical weeding, they walk together in the sense of not replacing that hand labor, but improving what is there today and also covering a lack that we have on the market today, along with the high prices that the farmers are paying for those crews that come to weed and spray for them. So that's I don't know what the future holds, but I think these new technologies, they are going to play a big role on the near future, mainly because of the regulations and everything.
By the way, electrostatic is not dead. I really like last year I saw that Jan Mar, there was Jan Mar autonomous sprayer.
Yeah, lots in the tree industry.
For vineyards, I believe. And I also, Autonomy in California, they have also just partnered up with electrostatic.
But on that topic, because I've used it in yours quite a bit, it's difficult to get the right chemistries in those tanks
For electric.
to apply properly. Because when you actually talk to manufacturers, the way that electrostatic works, you're going against what the intention is usually of that chemistry. So it is difficult to get the control that you're looking for. So it's not bad. It works well. You have to find the right chemistries that really work.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
It's used a lot more in Europe than here.
It is. Yeah.
One thing I
More
have
questions?
about the conversation is you have to always weigh productivity in this discussion, right? And whether it's lasers, whether it's manual, that the spray system offers you a little more flexibility to cover more ground and get acres sprayed.
And I use them in my control and berries. I had 150 of them. So they were very effective in that direction. I mean, totally chemistry dependent and application dependent.
Just curious, with this precision technology you have, how do you convey this information to EPA in terms of the regulatory policy standpoint? Because it's targeted, less chemical loading to the environment, you give more protection to the applicator and to the public. I mean, just curious, is there a consortium in here of you folks making a one voice to EPA that, hey, there are newer technologies in here that you guys are helping the environment? Just curious if there is a consortium of you guys in here that that I'm not aware of, I want to be aware of. Thank you.
I would just say, I think one of the strongest things we can do is provide the research to EPA to show what we're doing. And we have lots of scientists working on that at EPA. Stanley Culpepper is probably leading the march, and having that data to show that farmers are reducing the load of pesticides is one of the biggest things we can do.
I'll just say, we as a company, and I know Deere is as well, and if you guys aren't, I recommend you join it. There's a group called the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. And so through this kind of consortium of industry case, a lot of different players are in that. We are working together with a lot of this data and kind of submitted a targeted application or working on a standard to submit it to the EPA. So that's just the avenue how some of these companies are doing that.
Tomorrow in the vegetable session at 10:30, Stanley's going to be talking about some of what he's done.
So I have a question specifically for you, Professor Goldman. You mentioned that the number of leg segments increased the reliability for going over rough terrain. How does the number of segments change cost of transport or payload capacity?
I don't know. I don't know yet. These are things we are working on. And clearly, we don't want an infinite number of robot segments. We want to sort of try to figure out how to bring in. I'm not going to quite answer your question because I don't know. But I will say that you know, it seems so far that over most bumpy terrain, some combination of legs, plus the other interesting reason for you to go about that, which I think is side of dorsal ventrally flex, and laterally flex, just like it comes out the ends. And those can act as extra legs. So, you know, we know that in pristine theory, if you make it, we have a theory that says the longer you make it, the more reliable it bounds on whether you get where you be. That's going to clearly increase the cost of transport. But we want to now bring the computational aspects of it. So say, okay, I have, let's say, fewer number of things. What do I have to sense? How fast do I have to sense it? And what do I have to do in response to that to achieve similar performance?
Kind of like compensate me.
Correct, yeah.
So what do you give up to compensate for the other things?
Yeah, so if you, what we're finding now is, actually the analogy I made with information theory, communication theory, all of our digital technology that I've heard so briefly today, all relies on bits, single binary zero. We developed a concept called BACs, basic active contacts. Those are the limb contacts or the body contacts. And we can sort of sequence, like you can sequence bits to send a message properly. We can sequence BACs to send a message properly. And that message can go on. So we now can play a game, what we're calling bits for BACs. So if you say, well, I only want to be able to use this many BACs and this coding level, this pattern, how many bits do I need to compensate for that? So we now have a way to quantify that. And what that quantification what we need to do is we have to, it turns out, the state results are, we measure your back contamination just like you would measure if your message got sent by different bits you contained. You measure that and you apply some correction via changing of your attempt to regenerate that back pattern. Well,
that's like when you trip, you try to break your fall.
correct.
That makes sense.
Correct. This is but the game is not to, most of robotics, like in robotics up to now, has largely been this idea of really using bits, right? I'm going to sense everything, I'm going to look at every obstacle, treat every irregularity in the environment as an obstacle, either avoid it or use it properly. That's very computational, costly. We will not have to worry about most of that and figure out what's the appropriate thing, 2 cents, and how to respond to that. That's the closing. That's going to increase the cost of transport because you have the computer to go in and we think you can bring down the number of seconds. All early days research. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Is the technology available now so that you can, what's limiting the speed of your robot?
Yeah, well, it depends on what you mean by speed. If it means feet per second, meters per second, that, or the number of body lengths a second, those are 2 different things. We think we can hit sort of fundamental number of body lengths per second as given by a certain number of legs on a certain frictional ground. Then the next thing is to increase the speed. In order to do that, you have to increase the temporal frequency, how fast you're picking up equipment legs down. And that is motors, better motors, faster motors, stronger motors, less fuel, these sorts of things. But we think even those are particularly for some rocket head technology. That sort of stuff is starting to work out as well. So, and then that's on relatively simple ground. When you have to go through spaces and find environments.
Have any other questions? Not, I'll put in one more plug for Saturday morning session. I actually counted it up. I should have knew because I turned everything in. We've got 3 academic speakers and actually 3 farmers. So I think it's going to be a really good talk. Farmers using similar or close technology is what we talked about today in a lot of the cases. And then we've got somebody from University of Georgia, Auburn, and Florida all talking about some of the advanced research that they're doing. So again, kind of different dynamics there. So come back on Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. I'm not sure what room. I didn't look, but you can find us. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you all.
Thank you.